Hello, welcome back. We're on day 2 of the Precious Metal Summit here in Zurich, and I'm with Tim Warman, the CEO of Fuerte Metals, formerly Atacama Copper. Tim, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks.
Look, first time on the channel, so why don't you just introduce the story? Obviously, you've just done a name change, maybe a little bit on why that was as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the company used to be called Atacama Copper. It was focused on a project in Chile, a large porphyry target in a great area. But then, we expanded and we did a transaction with a private company and brought in some projects in Mexico and a new partner. And we thought that, Atacama was a bit geographic and commodity specific, so we came up with the name Fuerte Metals, which we quite like. Fuerte obviously means strong in Spanish, and I think it reflects the company. Strong management team, some really strong backers, and some really good projects.
Yeah, let's get into that, because I was looking through the presentation before we had to sit down, and one of the things that jumped out at me straight away was the cap structure of this company. I mean, it's really tightly held. You've got some really. Why don't we go into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So that's obviously key in an exploration company is the cap structure. And right now we've got about 60 million shares outstanding, and we have almost no dilutive securities. So the last time we did our financing, we did it straight shares, no warrants. So the fully diluted is only about 66 million shares. So it's quite tight in that regard. And then we have some really strong shareholders. We have Pierre Lassonde and Trinity Capital, which is basically Pierre's merchant bank. They own about 30% of the company. Agnico Eagle, a strategic investor, owns about 8.5%. And then the rest, management owns about 12%, a little more. And then the rest is a couple of funds and a lot of high net worth individuals. So it's we don't trade huge volumes, I think, because people are expecting us to do things with the company and want to hang on to it, and it's worked quite well so far.
Yeah, no. That's almost, in a way, I've seen a couple of companies that have a similar type of structure like that, like Rupert Resources, that you see these big discovery and then you see these big shifts, and they don't have the same volatility in terms of lows and highs, but it's a really nice recipe for when you do have success to obviously go upwards, which is great. Not only that, something that I really liked as well is obviously the background of the management team. So obviously we'll get into the deposit and we'll get into why I think, especially this Mexico stuff, I really like the look of. But look, you've got a proven operating background. I think quite a few of the guys around you do. Let's just talk a bit about the team.
Yeah, so I mean, the team is pretty tight. It's mainly myself and Charlie Roncos, who's our VPX. We run the company effectively, and Charlie's got a really interesting background. He's a long-time exploration geologist. He was the vice president of exploration for Glamis Gold, a very, very successful company. Glamis was acquired by Goldcorp, and Charlie became the VPX at Goldcorp. He was the VPX at Goldcorp for a number of years. And that was back when Goldcorp was a really, good, well-focused, profitable company. It had its, a bit of a decline after that, but when Charlie left, he picked up a couple of Goldcorp assets that he really liked and that they were looking to divest. And those have come into Fuerte now. And then, on my background, I'm also a geologist, but probably have spent less time actually banging on rocks. I've been on management teams of, some really successful companies. I've been very lucky in my career to have worked with some good people. And, I was at Aurelian Resources when we found Fruta del Norte in Ecuador, which is now the mine of Lundin Gold, probably one of the most profitable gold mines in the world right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I was with Dalradian Resources, which was taken private by Orion. That's actually in Northern Ireland, well-known mining jurisdiction. And then I was on the board of Continental Gold from its beginnings. They had the Buritica project in Colombia. That's now in production. They were taken out by Zijin Mining, the Chinese firm. And then most recently, I was the CEO of Fiore Gold. And Fiore was really interesting because we bought a bankrupt mine in Nevada that had literally gone bankrupt within a year of it being built. It had probably cost $100 million to build that mine. We bought it for $5 million, turned it around. We had it generating free cash flow for 5 years, and then we sold the company to Calibre Mining for $170 million. And interestingly, in that time between buying the mine and selling it, we didn't issue a single share. We didn't do a fundraising. We lived off cash flow from the mine and expanded it and did exploration and got new projects and then sold the company without any dilution at all to our shareholders. So, So and then now onto Fuerte, which is back in the exploration game.
Okay, let's move on to the project. So, like I said, you had this I guess prior when it was Atacama Copper, it was really more of a Chilean copper focus. But since then, when did you acquire this thing in Mexico? Because this looks pretty impressive.
Yeah, so the Mexican transaction closed in February of this year. So we basically acquired a private company that had been put together by Charlie Roncos, who's now our VPX, and by Pierre Lassonde and the Trinity Capital guys. And they've been funding it privately for about 5 years, and then wanted to take it public and saw a good opportunity by putting it into Atacama. And so we've been actually actively drilling in Mexico since about March. So as soon as we closed the transaction, we got the drills on the ground and started drilling, and we're drilling now on it.
Okay, and obviously we've had some drill holes come through. I think some pretty smashy intercepts of around 20 meters in thickness, right? Yeah. Let's just run through that, because then I really would like to get into the geology of this thing and how it potentially works.
So it's interesting. The veins themselves are quite thick. Some of these veins are 10 meters thick, and they're not skinny little veins that you have to try and chase and figure out where they're going and things like that. They just sort of trundle off across the countryside for kilometers, and they make a very appealing target from that regard. The drill intercepts are really a result of us targeting high-grade zones within those veins, because there had been a previous resource that was done on the basis of an open pit resource.
Okay.
And it came out with about 1.5 million ounces, but it was at a grade of 1.3 grams.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to do an open pit on a steeply dipping vein, you end up with a very high strip ratio, and it's not really that practical. And vertical veins, especially thick vertical veins, really are they're better suited for underground mining. So that's our focus now. We know there are very high grade panels within these. That's what we've been targeting, and consistently getting intercepts of well above 7 grams over anywhere from 2 to 8 meter true horizontal thicknesses in these veins. So it's working really well so far.
All right, so I think you've just answered what one of my main questions was going to be, because when I saw the research, I think you had around 700,000 ounces in indicated, was it, and around 700,000 ounces in inferred, right? And that was all around the 1.3.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And then I also saw that you thought it was going to be amenable to underground mining. And I looked at the grade and I thought, well, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, you're not going to mine 1.3 grams underground, but you can definitely mine 7 grams underground. And it's interesting in Mexico because the cost structures in Mexico are so much lower. For example, direct drilling costs are $125 a meter for core, which is unheard of. But you can do that in Mexico.
Mexico's generally, I do think Mexico, if you're going to go looking for a silver deposit, cost effectively, that's the place to be.
We get a lot of bang for our buck in terms of drilling dollars. But even if you look at the kind of grades that you can mine underground in Mexico, Charlie and I visited Fresnillo's San Julian mine in September, and they're mining 4.5 grams underground on relatively narrow veins, much more narrow than our veins. Fully mechanized mine, really modern, and generating good profits by just the fact that your cost structures are lower there, and they're also very efficient, very effective miners.
Yeah, because I think you need around 3 meters usually for mechanization in terms of the.
These guys are mining 90 centimeters mechanized underground.
Really?
I mean, it's really impressive
to
watch.
How does that? I know we're going off topic, but how does that work? Does that not increase the strip in a way?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not a mining engineer. I'm a geologist, and so the exact mechanics of it, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, obviously they're taking a bit of dilution, but really they're mining out to about a little less. I think they were around 1.2 meters was the total stope width.
Right.
They're just taking these really nice narrow slices out of it. It helps that the veins aren't kind of swirling around all over the place.
That's the problem sometimes.
They're very predictable. But it was impressive. I mean, the guys operating the drills in the stopes were actually sitting up in a boardroom on surface, operating them by remote control with TV cameras. It was really modern.
What a world we live in now, So going back to your project, so the widths look decent, and you're saying that these higher grade areas within the veins, that you think there's enough thickness there.
Yeah.
So what would that, because obviously at the moment you're looking at it as a whole, and you've got the old resource and you're saying the 1.3.
Yeah.
Obviously you're going to have to reduce some of the ounces there, but how much do you think you're going to take a knock on the number of ounces if you can keep the high grade?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get, at the end of this drilling program, we're doing a 20,000 meter drill program, really just specifically focusing in and targeting those high grade zones. And the one nice thing about the high-grade zones is, if you imagine the vein as a flat sheet, the high-grade zones sort of run as panels down the within that sheet.
Okay.
And they're several meters wide. They're 100 meters in length along the vein. But the really neat thing is the vertical extent of them is really impressive here. They go for, we've traced the one vein down over about 300 meters vertical. You've got 7-gram intervals at the top. You've got 7-gram intervals at the bottom, still wide open at depth.
Yeah.
And so, that there's a lot of vertical extent to these veins, and I think that makes them a lot more amenable. A lot of epithermal deposits like these, the actual vertical extent of the mineralization will only be 100, 150 meters, and they just kind of peter out. Our veins don't seem to be doing that. They're still going strong at 300 meters down. So a lot of upside there, just vertically. And then we've got a whole series of parallel veins that have never been in the resource, that don't have enough drill holes to actually get into the resource yet. But you've got indications in these kind of scattered drilling, again, of very high-grade intercepts over good widths. So,
how are you going about the exploration model? Because obviously you've got this existing zone that
Yeah.
you found and you're testing for the high-grade
Yeah.
areas and whatnot, but then you're saying there's parallel zones.
Yeah.
How easy is it to map and identify where these zones are and where you should be putting the drill bit?
we're obviously benefiting from a lot of previous drilling that
Yeah.
have been done by Goldcorn, by Glamis before them, and by the private company before we merged with them. So what they had done was a lot of scout drilling along these sort of widely spaced scout drilling along all these other vein systems. So all of the other vein systems have at least a couple of holes in them, and all of them have some high-grade hits. So the trick is, go back in and say, if there's a 8 grams over 2 meter hit, step out a little bit from it, put in another hole, and just keep stepping laterally and vertically until you find the edges of it, and then you start to define it and start to fill it in and move on that way. So we're not just drilling blind. We know we've got these high-grade hits to follow on. So for example, the main vein with the bulk of the drilling in it is called Guadalupe, and that's where the existing resource sits. We drilled that one prior to a short break in the summer. Now we're back, and we're actually drilling an area to the north called Los Ingleses. And Los Ingleses actually had the highest grade intercept we've ever had in that deposit, which was something like 800 grams gold equivalent, admittedly over a relatively narrow intercept. It was about 20 centimeters, but you can take a lot of dilution with 800 grams, and still mine it. So, and there were other, much wider hits around that. So that's the area we're drilling right now, and then we'll move on to a third area called Mexico Libre, which also had 20 gram plus intercepts over multiple meters, true horizontal width. So we'll just keep chasing up these indications of high grade and just starting to build them out, drill them out, define them, and then add them to the resource.
The existing resource, is that just within one vein structure?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many of these vein structures are you aware of that look interesting from the Goldcorp
there's
data?
There's at least four, but we
okay.
know there are more than that, particularly to the south of us. And we also know that the veins extend to the west off of our property under some cover rocks. And we have actually applied for a much larger concession package that's about probably 5 or 6 times our existing concession package. All of the concession granting in Mexico has been suspended for the last 3 years with the previous president. We're hoping that's going to free up with the new president. She seems a lot less hardline in some of her policies.
I agree.
And if we do that, we'll have even more targets on a more regional kind of scale to start chasing after. So.
Good. Okay. And just talk to me a little bit about what the exploration. Did you say you're doing 20,000 meters?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. What does that look like in terms of drilling out the existing resource, testing some of these?
Yeah. So
targets?
the goal is to really focus in on 3 key areas. So the main Guadalupe vein, that area that we just finished drilling called Los Ingleses, and the Mexico Libre vein, because those are the ones where we have the highest concentration of these high-grade hits. And we'll sort of obviously take the low-hanging fruit first. We'll get that done probably in about May or June of next year, and then we'll do a resource update. And that resource update is going to be based on an underground resource. So we really want to demonstrate, kind of pivot from that idea of an open pit resource to an underground resource, demonstrate that it's doable. Ideally, I'd like to get in that 1 million ounce range at sort of north of 6 grams. I think that would be a really nice basis for a good start. And then, we want to make the decision, is it time to do a PEA, or should we keep drilling and just keep growing the resource? I mean, PEAs haven't added a lot of value in the last year or two.
I don't
Companies
think
that
so,
have put them
no.
out, so maybe it's better just to keep growing it. But we'll make that call, next summer when we finish the drilling program.
Yeah, see what sort of environment we're in then, I guess. But yeah, it seems like the only value really coming now is de-risking through permits or the drill bit, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, maybe that's bridge across. Okay, in terms of the actual underlying system, is this similar to a lot of the other gold in Mexico, epithermal sort of vein system? Yeah, it's pretty bog standard
It's a
stuff.
classic epithermal system. It's got, it's about 40% gold, it's about 30% silver, and then the rest is base metals, and primarily zinc. So,
okay.
So the bulk of it, 70% of the value is in the gold and silver,
Okay.
and the rest is in the base metals. And so far, the metallurgy we've seen looks pretty straightforward. Produces nice concentrates. It's it's not oxide. You won't be heap leaching this stuff, but it'll go through a mill and a flotation circuit. But again, all very well established kind of process flow sheets you see in Mexico.
Good. And how well funded are you now to do this 20,000 meter campaign? What does that look like?
So we should be pretty much fully funded through to the end of that program. It's about a $5 million program.
Okay.
I think we had $8 million left in the bank. After doing a quarter
Canadian
of a
or
program.
US? Canadian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we're funded through to the end of that program. We might, we're still trying to decide what to do in Chile, whether we want to do some drilling down there, or whether we want to partner with somebody to drill in Chile, because Chile is quite expensive. We haven't budgeted for that yet because we want to wait and see how the discussions.
Well, like
with
you said,
some
you've
of our
got a lot of
neighbors go.
low-hanging fruit right in front of you in Mexico.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think Mexico's where the best kind of bang for your buck is in terms of drilling efficiency and the cost of drilling.
Yeah. Well, I guess because we didn't talk about Chile, but you sort of indicated there that the strategy might be to find a JV partner or do something. Is that? I guess what are you hearing from the likes of obviously Pierre Lassonde and whatnot? They've got into this story supposedly. It sounds like because of the Mexico play.
Yeah, exactly.
How much pressure are you getting from those guys to just really focus on Mexico and find JV partners?
No, I think they actually like the multi-project focus, because it means that you're not just dependent on one project for news flow.
Yeah.
Because at some point you're going to run into a hiccup on a project. Doesn't matter what it is, and it's nice to have another project to kind of fall back on. So. The Chilean projects. I mean, the Chilean projects are not as far advanced.
Yeah.
They've never been drilled, but they're very strategically located because they're completely surrounded by the ground of a major joint venture between Teck and Newmont called Nueva Union. And Nueva Union has 20 billion pounds of copper and 10 million ounces of gold in reserves. I mean, they've got a full feasibility on that, and right now they're updating the feasibility on it. But we sit between two porphyries that they're going to link together by a conveyor belt, a 40-kilometer long conveyor belt that goes right through the middle of our ground.
Good postcode.
And so I think we're very strategic for them. We've already had some discussions with Newmont. We'd love to have them come in and do fund the drilling. It's obviously very expensive to drill in Chile, but Agnico also just made a significant investment into ATEX, which is a copper exploration company in Chile. That was also backed by Pierre Lassonde and Trinity Capital. So Agnico's a shareholder of ours. So that's another discussion we could have is, do you want another copper project in Chile?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
What about, so that's interesting with Agnico. So they were 8.4%, did you say?
8.4%.
Okay. Have they been following their money, and how did they get in? So in the last round, did they follow their money?
They did, yeah.
They did,
so they came in a private company when it was just a strictly Mexican-focused asset, because they liked the size potential of Christina, but they think,
So they came in with Pierre and...
Yeah, with Pierre and Charlie and those guys. Yeah, because the Trinity Capital guys are very close to Agnico.
Yeah. So essentially, you had the copper company.
Yeah.
Pierre, Trinity, Agnico were all involved in the Mexico play. They folded that into you. They've now become your shell. Okay.
Yeah.
And have you done a raise since you've done that deal of bringing in the...
No, so we did the raise in conjunction with that deal. So we raised just under $13 million.
But Agnico, Pierre, and everyone all put money in along with the deal.
Yeah,
okay,
Ross
so they
Beatty's,
didn't just get their shares.
And Ross Beatty's guys are in the company too. Scott
course.
Hicks, obviously from the Lumina Group, is our chairman. And we work a lot with some of their guys as well. So we've got a really, I think almost unparalleled shareholder registry, and that's really key. When you're trying to raise funds, is people will look and go, are they in? Are they putting money in? And if the answer is yes, then people tend to follow me.
Yeah, no, agreed. Okay.
But
All right, so look, say we're sitting here in 12 months' time.
Yeah.
What do you want to be able to tell me?
12 months' time, I want to have some holes into the Chilean projects, and I'd love to make a discovery down there because, if you look at how we add value to this, Mexico is going to be just a steady incremental value addition as we drill holes, as we add ounces, as we produce a resource update. I don't think there's going to be anything kind of overnight transformative about that project. It's going to be a steady value add, which is fine. The Chilean projects, right now I don't think we're getting a lot of value for them because there's no drill holes, there's just some surface showings.
Yeah,
and very encouraging.
Proximity play
but
as
still,
well, right?
yeah. But if you put a hole into that and you come back with 100 meters at 1% copper, that's a bit of a binary outcome for the company. I mean, to be fair, you can put a hole into that and find it's one of those interesting but not really sort of targets, and that can happen. But no, we think they certainly look promising, on surface.
Does the mineralization from the two next door to you, I'm assuming that doesn't stop at the license, does it?
It's not as though the mineralization extends onto our ground. It's more these
If
are
there's
discrete
another
clusters of porphyries,
okay.
and we think we have a couple of those in the cluster within our ground. And in fact, one of the targets on our ground actually crosses the concession boundary and is partly in the Newmont ground. So we sort of each have a good chunk of that the one target, and then the other targets are entirely on our ground.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So you need to. And how deep is the drilling there?
So we haven't done any drilling yet. So
but how deep are the porphyries
how
next
deep
door?
would you have to go?
Yeah.
The porphyries at El Morro in particular, which is the more high grade one that Newmont has. I believe you don't have to drill very deep there. It does get very high grade, sort of 300 meters down.
Okay,
you get a jump in grade, but the upper portion is what they're currently looking at mining right now. In order to test our project, we'd probably do hole depths somewhere in the vicinity of 700 to 1,000 meters in hole length, just to make sure that we, had thoroughly tested the target and didn't miss anything. Obviously we'd like to hit something closer to the surface than that, but we'll see.
Is there any altitude differences in terms of where the surface starts between you and your neighbors? Are you higher up or?
We're kind of in between. So the higher grade of the two porphyries in the Tech Newmont joint venture is up at about 4,600 meters.
Okay.
We're down around 3,800 meters. And then where they're going to put the plant site, which is at the larger low-grade porphyry that was the Tech project, it's down around 3,000 meters roughly, which is why they're going to put the plant down there. Obviously, they have more room and it's lower elevation and things like that. So,
how crucial is it for them to progress those projects in Chile without the ground that you own? Is it more difficult, or have they already found a way around it?
I mean, in terms of the ground we own, it would be, where they've currently showed their conveyor alignment goes right over one of our best targets.
Above it?
Yeah, like literally overland above it. So, I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world, I'm sure, for them to divert it around it if we said, look, we want to drill this thing. And I think it's more that if they were to find something on our ground, we're less than half the distance to their mill site that the porphyry where they're planning to start mining is. So maybe instead of having to do a 40-kilometer conveyor, you'd have to do a 15-kilometer conveyor to start off with, and and also start mining at a lot lower elevation. So, yeah, I think there's potential synergies, there's potential benefits, to their larger mining project. Probably increases the economics too, because it increases the size. But again, it's early days, and I think we'd want to probably do some kind of an earn-in or a joint venture with them, so that they pay for the drilling and they earn a certain percentage of the property. And
have you done any sort of like geophysics or any mag or anything like that? Is there any correlation between what's around you towards what you've got?
We literally just finished a geophysical survey over the projects, and it looks very promising. I don't even have the final data back yet, but the initial things we're seeing on the lines look very good. We also know that there are geochemical anomalies over these things from rock samples. So there's elevated copper, elevated gold, elevated molybdenum, just exactly what you'd expect to see at El Morro. And we have a lot of insight into the Tech Newmont projects because when Charlie was VPX at Goldcorp owned the Newmont one, El Morro. So he's been there, he's modeled it, he's seen it, he knows exactly
what he's looking out for.
So he's pretty excited about what we're seeing on our ground.
Good. All right. Well, look, I'd love to see a discovery there this time next year. And, best of luck with 20,000 meters, and we'll keep following.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.